Hello everyone. For those of you who have not met me, I'm Liezel Schultz. I'm a conveyancing attorney and a notary public, and I'm practicing in Durban with Goldman Schultz Attorneys. So this afternoon I want to talk about what is notarial authentication. I receive so many emails and inquiries about notarial authentication. And it really is because so many of us are working overseas in different countries, traveling a lot, investing overseas. And when you do any of those things, you might very well need some of your documents notarially signed and authenticated in terms of the rules of the country where you are going to. So let me first explain what is a notary public, or a notary, is a qualified attorney who has obtained a further specialization of notarial, or a notary. So it is a specialist area of law that you specifically have to qualify for. There isn't many notaries around. When you Google notary, you'll find a lot less notaries around than just normal attorneys. But when you need to have documentation notarized, you will need to get a notary. And a normal signature by an attorney or a commissioner of oaths will not be acceptable to the countries that do require these documentation to be notarized. So in terms of what a notary does, the first thing a notary can do is to notarize a copy of a document as a true and authentic document of the original. So in that case, you will take to the notary the original education certificate or document that you need to have notarized, and the notary will make a copy and certify that the copy is a true replica of the original document. The second function that a notary can do is to confirm the signature is the signature of the person who signed the document in front of the notary. So in that case, the person will bring the necessary documentation to the notary public that is required to be signed, and that person will sign the documentation in front of the notary, and the notary will put up a certificate to confirm that that document was signed in the presence of the notary after he has identified the person that signed it. So those are the two functions of a notary. It is important to know that often countries abroad require documentation that are issued by the South African government to be apostilled. And some countries may even need the certificate of a notary to be apostilled. Now let me explain to you what an apostille is. An apostille is an additional document where it is required for a notary's certificate. It means that the notary has to take the document to the registrar of the High Court, who will then confirm that the person who says he's a notary is indeed a notary public of the High Court. So the certificate is issued by the court on an apostille to confirm that the notary public who signed the document is indeed a notary public. That is an apostille when it is required for a document that is signed by a notary. Those are things like unabridged birth certificates, marriage certificates, police clearances, etc. Those documentation that are signed by an official of government will then have to be apostilled by DIRCO. DIRCO is a department or an arm of government. DIRCO's offices are in Pretoria. They have very clear guidelines in terms of their website. So all you need to do is go onto DIRCO's website, search apostille or authentication, and it will take you to the page that tells you exactly what to do. But what it boils down to is you would need to get the original issued document from Home Affairs, i.e. the marriage certificate or the birth certificate. You would then have to send that document to DIRCO in Pretoria. You can either hand deliver it or you can send it by courier. And DIRCO will then attach an apostille to that document that will confirm that the official of the government was indeed an official authorized to sign that document, and it authenticates the legitimacy of that particular document. That authentication cannot be done by a notary, because a notary cannot certify that the person in that particular arm of government was authorized to sign that document. Only government can do that. So government documents that are required to be authenticated by way of an apostille in terms of countries abroad would need to be apostilled by DIRCO. A notary can only certify that a copy of that document is a true copy. A notary cannot certify as to the veracity and legality and effectiveness of that document. So it is important to read the requirements of the country abroad clearly and carefully to be able to ascertain what kind of authentication do they need. Are they happy with copies to be notarized by a notary? Do they want an apostille confirming the appointment of the notary on top of that? And do they require the authenticity and validity of any government issued document to be apostilled and authenticated by DIRCO? I just wanted to also touch on different documentation that can be required to be authenticated. And those are things like, as I said earlier, passports and ID copies. So if it's simply a copy of an ID or a passport, those will have to be authenticated by a notary public. And that notarial certificate will just say that the copy of that ID or passport is a true copy of the original issue document. Academic records will need to be authenticated as well if you want to use those academic records, that's degrees and transcripts, if you want to use those documents overseas. Now, again, a notary public cannot authenticate a degree, whether that degree was actually issued. That will have to be done by the issuing institution or by SAQA. It's SAQA for the South African Qualifications Authority. So you would have to check with them, follow their requirements, sending the actual degree to them, and they will then certify that document is in fact true and correct and valid. And then the other documents that will usually have to get notarized is things like birth certificates, marriage certificates, and death certificates. These documents will need to be apostilled by DIRCO. So you will obtain the original issued certificate from Home Affairs, and after that you'll send it to DIRCO to have it apostilled. And then the other documents that often requires to be signed in front of a notary public if you want to use those documents overseas is things like powers of attorney and affidavit. So if you need to sign a document that is an affidavit or a power of attorney and you want to use that document overseas, it is not usually accepted for you just to sign it in front of a commissioner of oaths or a normal attorney. Normally those documents are required to be signed in front of a notary public. So the notary will then put their certificate up to say that the document was in fact signed in front of the notary by the correct person after that person was identified. And that is really the details of what authentication is that I wanted to outline today and explain today. If there's any questions you have insofar as authentication is concerned, or you are in the position where you need these documents, please feel free to reach out to your local notary public. You're welcome to reach out to me as well for guidelines and further information. It's certainly not as complicated as it sounds and daunting as it sounds. If you need the apostille by DIRCO, just follow these steps on their website. They are very clear. You'll get your document back in the time frame that they say in terms of their website. I've personally had to do that, and it's really not a difficult thing to accomplish. On that note, I want to say goodbye to everybody until I chat to you again in a month's time. Have an awesome Tuesday afternoon. Thank you very much. Bye.